Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
It was 7:14 p.m. when the message came through. No build-up or warning. Just a plain, emotionless text sitting at the top of my screen like it hadn't just rewritten everything. I don't want to be touched anymore. I read it twice. Then a third time. She didn't say right now or I need space. She made it a rule, flat and final. A declaration that intimacy, even the smallest gestures like a hand on her back or a kiss goodnight, were off limits now. I didn't text back. I stared at the screen until it dimmed on its own. I already knew there was nothing left to say. Because truth is, I had seen this coming for a while. It started quietly. The missed kisses when I left for work. The way she leaned slightly away when I reached for her hand in public. How she'd angle her body on the couch so she could face the TV, not me. It all added up to something she probably thought I hadn't noticed. But I had. I didn't know she was bold enough to spell it out in a sentence like that. No softness, just an order. The apartment felt colder that night, though nothing had changed. She was in the kitchen reheating something from a takeout box, scrolling on her phone like always. I watched her for a second, waiting to see if she'd glance at me, maybe say something, anything. I sat there in silence, watching the light bounce off her wine glass while she sipped it like she hadn't sent a message that gutted our marriage. She didn't even seem tense. She looked relaxed, comfortable even, and that's what struck me hardest. She was completely at ease being distant from me, like she had gotten used to it, like she preferred it. We'd had dry spells before. Every couple does. But this time it felt different. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was her closing the door and bolting it from the inside. I stayed quiet, but my eyes were open now. I started paying attention to every little detail. She stopped wearing her usual pajamas, the ones she used to lounge around in when we'd spend Friday nights watching old movies together. Lately, it was leggings and tank tops that hugged her curves in a way that wasn't for me. I asked if she wanted to watch something one night, just casually. She looked up from her phone and said, "I'm not really in the mood for anything passive right now." Then went right back to texting. I didn't push. I just nodded. Next day, she posted a picture of her cocktail from some rooftop bar downtown. I hadn't even known she was out. She'd said she was having a quiet evening catching up on emails. I scrolled through her Instagram story. Full face of makeup. Bright red lipstick. The kind she used to wear on date nights with me. She looked alive in that video, like a different person. Laughing, animated, standing next to a group of women I barely recognized. At home, she barely spoke in full sentences anymore. But there, she was electric. I started remembering the last time she initiated a hug. I couldn't. I actually tried to picture it. Her arms around me, her head on my chest, and I couldn't recall the last time it happened. That realization sat heavy in my gut. The silence between us became the loudest part of the day. Morning coffee? We'd drink it without a word. Dinner? She ate quickly, eyes on her phone, while I tried not to stare at the gap between us. At night, she curled up on her side of the bed without so much as a glance in my direction. I wanted to ask her what changed. Wanted to tell her how much this hurt. But every time I thought about opening my mouth, I remembered that text and her silence afterward. So I said nothing. I started spending more time at work. Volunteered for projects I didn't care about. Stayed late, just to avoid the house that no longer felt like mine. Some nights, I sat in my car for an hour before going in. Just sat there, listening to the ticking of the engine as it cooled. She never noticed how late I came home. Never asked where I'd been. One night, I tested it. I stayed out until nearly midnight. Didn't text or call. When I finally came in, she was asleep on the couch with a half-finished glass of wine beside her. She didn't even stir. I could have been anywhere. I could have done anything. And she wouldn't have known. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't just done with intimacy. She was done with us. She hadn't bothered to move out yet. And I wasn't going to beg to stay in a place where I'd already been erased. I was going to leave exactly the way I arrived, quietly, respectfully. But this time, permanently. Because if she didn't want to be touched, she wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. She wouldn't have to worry about anything at all. I'd take the weight I carried with me. The warmth. The loyalty. The consistency she didn't value. I'd leave her with the silence she asked for. And only then would she understand what that kind of emptiness really feels like. I didn't slam a door or scribble out a note. No accusations. That would have made it about drama, and I didn't need that. I needed clarity. And by then, I already had it. She was still asleep when I got up, curled in her usual spot, one leg tucked under the blanket, one arm stretched out like she was reaching for something. Maybe that was muscle memory. Maybe it used to be me. I stood there a few seconds longer than I should have, just looking at her, trying to feel something. Maybe nostalgia or grief, but there was nothing, just a tired emptiness. A quiet confirmation that I'd already mourned this marriage before she ever typed that message. I didn't make coffee for both of us like I always used to. I just showered, got dressed, and left. The first stop was a storage unit. I'd rented it weeks ago. At the time, I wasn't even sure why. Something just told me to start separating pieces of my life. I'd been slowly moving out, item by item. Important papers, duplicate clothes, tools, things she never noticed were gone. It's strange how little someone has to care to miss the signs. I'd kept my withdrawals subtle. When she asked where the passport folder was, I told her I'd filed it somewhere safer. When she wondered why her favorite blender was missing, I said it broke and I tossed it. She accepted both without pushing back. Because she didn't really care, only noticed when something inconvenienced her. That day, I added the last few essentials to the unit. My birth certificate, the title to my car, a few family heirlooms. Things that had meaning to me. Things that would have just collected dust in our apartment. After that, I went to work like it was a regular Tuesday. But everything about me had changed. At lunch, I deleted our shared calendar, canceled the grocery delivery, paused the streaming accounts tied to my name. I left her with access to the utilities and bills. She could handle them now. She had said she didn't want to be touched. That included all the invisible labor I carried for years. I expected a reaction, some hint that she noticed. But the days rolled by with nothing. She kept posting filtered smiles and wine glasses on social media. Out with friends. Brunch here, dinner there. Always a new outfit. Always a caption about reclaiming peace. The kind of slogans people use when they're trying to prove something, mostly to themselves. What she didn't post was the unmade bed, the laundry I used to fold, the dog I always walked, the silence that followed her around the apartment like a ghost. No texts or calls, no passive-aggressive digs. I wasn't surprised. She was the type to make distance look like strength, even when it was just avoidance in disguise. So I stayed silent too. But I watched quietly. She started changing in small ways. Nothing she probably noticed herself. Left for work later than usual. Didn't always wear makeup like before. Stopped turning on the lamp I used to fix when the bulb flickered. Then came the cracks. One night, I checked our shared finance app out of habit. She'd paid the rent late. Not drastically, but enough to trigger a fee. I smiled, not out of spite, but because it was the first time she felt the absence. 2 days later, she texted, "Hey, have you seen my backup credit card?" I didn't answer. She knew I had access to the account. She knew I'd always kept our finances clean and simple. Her message wasn't really about the card. It was the first poke, the first soft reach into the empty space where I used to be. Still, I said nothing. I stopped going home altogether. Found a short-term rental on the edge of the city, cheap, quiet, simple. A one-bedroom with peeling paint and a kitchen too small for 2 people. But it was mine. And every night, when I walked through that door, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. No tension. No second-guessing if a conversation would be welcome or ignored. Just space. Real, honest space. A few nights later, she called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then I set it down and continued eating. The next morning, she tried again. Then again that evening. By the third missed call, she left a voicemail. "Hey, just wanted to check in. I haven't seen you in a while. I guess I'm just wondering if everything's okay." I played it twice. There was no anger in her voice. No sarcasm. Just a weird mix of confusion and hesitation. Like she wasn't sure what she was asking or why. That night, I remembered the dinners I used to cook, the groceries I carried in without help, the times I massaged her shoulders while she complained about her day without once asking about mine. I remembered every night I lay beside her, wanting to hold her, but keeping my hands to myself because she made it clear they weren't welcome. And now, only now, she was wondering where I went. That's the thing about comfort. You don't notice it until it disappears. You don't value the quiet support, the predictable care, until it stops showing up. She'd told me she didn't want to be touched. And now, she was realizing that meant she wouldn't be held either, not financially, not in any way. That silence she built? It was hers now. I just made sure I wasn't living in it anymore. A full week passed before she texted again. This time, it wasn't vague. No pleasantries or soft check-ins. Just, "Are you staying somewhere else?" I read it once, locked my screen, and went back to folding laundry. She was starting to realize it now, what it meant when I disappeared, not in anger, but with finality. No noise or mess. Just gone. She'd always counted on me sticking around. That was her safety net. I was the one who fixed the loose drawer in the kitchen, paid the water bill before she even noticed it was due, reminded her to send birthday cards to her family. I showed up. Quietly. Repeatedly. And now that I didn't, the gears weren't turning as smoothly. By the time she sent that message, I'd already rerouted most of my mail, changed the billing address on my accounts, even updated my emergency contact info at work. Because I had accepted it, I no longer belonged in her world, and she no longer had a place in mine. It wasn't a clean break in the legal sense, yet. But emotionally, it was done. What we had left wasn't a relationship. It was a vacancy. And yet, she kept texting. First, the practical stuff. Do you have the insurance file? Have you seen my charger? I ignored all of it. Then came the subtler ones. The just wondering kind. Just wondering if you're okay. Just wondering if you're coming back soon. Just wondering if we should talk. Each message arrived with a little more weight than the last, as if she were realizing that the man she'd pushed aside wasn't circling back. One night, around 10:30, she called. I didn't answer. She didn't leave a voicemail this time. Instead, I got a text a few minutes later. I think we need to talk in person. I stared at it, because I could feel the shift behind those words. The certainty she once spoke with, when she told me what she didn't want, was dissolving. Now she was inching toward the one thing she never considered before, that I might actually let her sit in the silence she created, that I might not rescue her from it. The next day, she sent a longer one. I know things have been off, and I know I said things that hurt you. I didn't mean them like that. I just needed space. But I never thought you'd actually leave. She hadn't taken anything back, but she was beginning to sound unsettled. And that was new. Meanwhile, my life in the one-bedroom rental was starting to feel stable. Not joyful, necessarily, but clean, honest. I'd come home from work and cook simple meals. Read again, something I hadn't done in years. Started sleeping better. No more listening for the tone in her voice to gauge if it was a good night or one where everything I did would be met with indifference. I stopped checking her social media, not out of pain, but because I no longer cared who she was trying to impress or what version of her life she was curating for others. I wasn't in the background of her filtered photos anymore. I was off the page. At some point, I stopped needing to remind myself why I left. The reasons were still there, clear as ever, but they didn't sit on my chest anymore. They were just facts. Like weather reports from a city I no longer lived in. She texted again 2 days later. This time shorter. I didn't think you'd give up on us. And for the first time, I laughed. Because that's what she still didn't get. I absorbed the distance, the excuses, the slow erosion of something I used to believe was sacred. I gave her space. I gave her time. I gave her every opportunity to meet me halfway. And she gave me a message that said I wasn't allowed to touch her anymore. That's not someone you fight to hold on to. That's someone you walk away from before you forget how to feel at all. I never replied. But she wasn't done. One night, I came back to the rental after work and found an envelope slipped under the door. No return address. My name in her handwriting. Inside was a note. If you want to talk, really talk, I'll be here Saturday. I made dinner. Your favorite. You don't have to say anything. Just come home. Not our home. Not let's fix this. Just come home. As if that word still meant something. I placed the note on the counter and stared at it while boiling water for pasta. She didn't understand yet. Maybe she never would. Home isn't a location. It's a feeling. And once you gut it of warmth, of safety, of intimacy, there's no furniture that can fill the space. I didn't go that Saturday, but I imagined her setting the table, maybe even lighting candles, trying to recreate something she hadn't bothered to preserve when it was still alive. I imagined her waiting. And that was enough for me, because now she knew. She knew what it felt like when I stopped showing up, not with shouts or slammed doors, but with silence so deep it made her question the sound of her own thoughts. She knew that when I left, I didn't just step outside for air. I took the air with me, and she was left with a house that looked the same, but breathed differently. The messages slowed down after that Saturday. I guess she realized I wasn't bluffing. I had truly left, and the longer I stayed gone, the more obvious it became to her that the silence wasn't temporary. It was permanent. A few nights later, she sent one last attempt. A string of texts, all within minutes. You could have just said you needed space too. You didn't have to vanish. I made mistakes. I see that now. Please don't ignore me forever. I didn't answer any of them, because every word she sent came from panic, not from understanding. She wasn't apologizing. She was bargaining, trying to claw back a comfort she assumed would always be there. What she missed wasn't me. Not yet. It was what I made easier, quieter, more bearable. When you spend years building the invisible scaffolding of someone's life, supporting them in ways they don't even notice, they never think you'll walk away. Until you do. And then the foundation starts to crack. She started reaching out to mutual friends. I heard from one of them, a guy I used to play poker with once a month. She's asking if I've seen you. She says she's worried. I told him I was fine, then changed the subject. I wasn't about to turn this into gossip. What we had was between her and the space she left behind. I went back to my rental, sat on the couch, and thought about how much quieter life had become. No more being snapped at for asking simple questions. No more waiting to be noticed in my own living room. I used to think silence was painful. Turns out, it's peaceful once you've been ignored long enough. Then came the slip. A week after her last text, a delivery notice popped up on my phone, an old notification tied to our shared Amazon account. She hadn't logged me out yet. A package was headed to our old apartment. A new electric kettle, a restock of some hair products she loved, and a bottle of the wine I used to buy for her on special occasions. The wine caught me off guard, because she always insisted she didn't really care for it. Said it was too sweet after the first few sips. But she kept ordering it. And now she was ordering it again. Maybe habits linger longer than the people who created them. I deleted the app that night. Didn't need digital crumbs from a life I had already cleaned out. The next day, my phone buzzed again. Not her this time, my landlord from the old place. Hey, just wanted to let you know there's a repair request open from your unit. She said there's a problem with the dryer. I laughed under my breath. She still hadn't updated the lease. Still assumed I'd handle the logistics like I always did. I moved out a while ago, I told him. She'll need to manage that now. He paused. Oh, she didn't mention that. Yeah, I said. She probably didn't. And I hung up. That was the moment I realized how much she had taken my presence for granted. Not the companionship or the routine, but the structure. The quiet work. The kind of support you don't see until it's gone and nothing works the way it used to. I imagined her standing in front of that broken dryer, annoyed that it wasn't fixed, not even thinking to ask how it ever got fixed before. Because for years, it just got done. No questions or reminders. Just me, behind the scenes, making sure her life kept flowing. But now, she was learning what real independence meant. It wasn't just spa days and solo brunches. It was managing the day-to-day, paying the late fees, talking to the plumber, replacing light bulbs, reading through rental agreements. And slowly, I stopped wondering what she was thinking. Stopped checking to see if her name popped up on my screen. Because the version of me she missed didn't exist anymore. He had been dismantled over time, eroded by rejection, by half-hearted conversations, by quiet nights where her back was turned and her phone got more attention than I did. The man she remembered, reliable, forgiving, present, had walked away the night she made it clear he wasn't needed. And I had no interest in returning. Not to a place where my presence was tolerated, not treasured. Not to a woman who only reached out when the absence started costing her comfort. And definitely not to a relationship where touch was treated like a burden instead of a bond. Let her light candles if she wants. Let her set the table. Let her pour the wine she never liked and wait for a knock that won't come. Because some silences aren't pauses. They're conclusions. I used to wonder if I'd feel regret. If maybe, down the line, I'd question whether walking away in silence was too cold, too final. But that question never came. Not even once. Because what I've learned in these last few weeks, what I see so clearly now, is that the real damage wasn't caused by how I left. It was caused by how long I stayed. By how many times I convinced myself to wait, to understand, to give her more time to come around. I gave chances. I gave grace. I gave silence the benefit of the doubt. But none of it mattered. She had made her choice long before I did. She just wanted me to be the one to clean it up. The apartment lease eventually expired. She reached out once more, this time by email. Subject line, need to coordinate the move out. I opened it out of habit. It was dry, like a business memo. She outlined the logistics, when she'd be free to pack, what furniture she wanted to keep, who should cancel the utilities. Not a word about us. Not a single line acknowledging how we went from sharing a life to dividing possessions. I read it once, marked it as unread, and never opened it again. I'd already moved out, physically and emotionally. What she was trying to do now was tidy up the remains of something she neglected until it withered. And that wasn't my job anymore. One night, I passed by our old neighborhood. Not on purpose, just a different route home. The lights were still on in the window. Curtains I'd helped hang were drawn halfway, tilted at an angle. I could picture her inside, probably curled up with a glass of that same wine, scrolling through a feed full of smiles and strangers. I didn't slow down, because that wasn't home. It was a building I once kept warm. That warmth now lived with me, smaller, quieter, but mine. And that was enough. A friend ran into her recently. Said she looked off. Not sad exactly, just a little untethered. Kept looking at her phone. Said something about how fast everything had changed. I thanked him for the update and moved on. That wasn't my story anymore. She was learning, in her own time, what life looks like when the man who always made it easier stops showing up. She was feeling what it meant to live without the presence she never fully appreciated. And from the sound of it, she hadn't found a replacement for that. Not in friends, not in dates, not in herself. Maybe she will someday. Maybe she won't. But it won't be my responsibility to wonder. You just let them show you who they are. And you responded with silence. That's the part that still surprises me sometimes. Not how much it hurt to leave, but how calm it felt. It wasn't rage that carried me out the door. It was the quiet realization that I was no longer willing to be invisible in a relationship where I used to be the anchor. And she's still there, I imagine. Sitting in the comfort she thought she built alone. Only now she knows. It wasn't the walls or the candles or the matching towels that made that space feel whole. It was me, the man she pushed aside like he didn't matter. The presence she rejected in a single, careless text. And when she finally noticed I was gone, really gone, it wasn't love she felt. It was loss. But by then, I was already living a life she didn't get to be part of. Not out of spite. Not for revenge. And love, real love, requires mutual effort. She took the first part away, so I gave her the second. And that's where the story ends. Not with a confrontation, just with a man who walked away and never looked back.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.